Welcome, everyone, to the BlueDrop podcast, where we talk about the Blue Fly Collective perspective on Drupal and our community.
Thank you for joining us at today's episode, where we're discussing AI as a software that is developed, as well as using AI to develop software.
I'm Chad Hester, a co host with Rose Cameron. I'm an enterprise technical consultant and solutions architect with a 25-year background in web strategy, design, user experience, and development. I've been working heavily with Drupal and this community for over 16 years.
And I'm Rose Cameron, global brand strategist and cultural anthropologist with 30 years of experience working in high tech. I've launched little-known languages such as C, C++, Visual Basic, Linux, Rational Rose, Java, and Azure. Friend and confident to the developer community. So joining us today is a very, very special guest for this episode, Aaron Checo Pacheco. And he is the CEO and founder of OtterMon AI.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's great to be here.
Yeah. I think this is probably an episode a long time coming. We've had a few episodes so far, and I think in the technology world, if you're not talking about AI, you're just left in the dust at these points. So I guess just to kind of get us kickstarted, so AI is becoming so pervasive as, if nothing else, a software feature. So I guess, where does it seem to make the biggest impact, and where does it feel a bit shoehorned to satisfy diverse agendas?
Well, I mean, it feels to me like so many companies were forced to race into AI adoption, right? It became so big so fast that executive mandates went out across the world saying, you need to start using AI as part of your job. You need to use it to be more efficient. You need to use it to code. You need to use it for everything you can. And, I think the hope was twofold. One, by positioning themselves as AI companies, these organizations wanted to boost their stock, boost their reputation, show that they're agile, they're adaptive, they're able to leverage the power of innovative technologies to improve their bottom line and output better product, better solution. But I think there was also a notion of, we want to cut costs, right? And they were hoping that with AI adoption, they'd be able to hire fewer people in product and support and engineering, especially. So I think the first wave has now come and passed where everyone had to adopt AI as quickly as possible. And then you are now seeing the hangover of that, which is AI is not as easy to use and definitely not as secure to use as people were hoping. So I think there's a little bit of a, bro, what did I do last night type situation with AI, where folks are saying, okay, so we've got it in, it didn't solve all the world's problems. How do we actually use it for real in a sustainable, secure fashion now? And what does it mean for the future of any given business?
It's funny, guys, because 30 years on following tech, how many times do we have to see the same thing played out?
Yeah.
It's forever. Oh, look, bright shiny object, silver bullet, woohoo. And then this massive fall from grace. Do you think that people have to have that sense of kind of overwhelming excitation when it comes to new technology to get people to invest in it? I mean, what the heck is that? Because you never seem to have balance.
Well, I think we've seen it a few times already. Probably the earliest one that I can recall in my career would be the dot-com bubble burst, the rush to
Yeah.
create the web itself, domain parking, that sort of thing. And here's what I always tell people about bubbles, especially in tech, is, while that happened, the internet didn't disappear. It wasn't just a fad that just went away. It still exists, and it continued to evolve. And then we take a look at a more recent one. Recent in technical terms is not decades, it's years. So blockchain, for example,
Yep.
cryptocurrency, that sort of thing. So again, it didn't go away, but you saw a bloom and then it kind of receded a little bit and found kind of its way. So there were a lot of promises, I think, that any technical advancements make. And I think from the people's perspective of the ones who came up with the idea, the ones who deeply understand the idea, I always say, don't be a hammer looking for a nail. Like these are still tools; they are still valuable tools. But let's start first by understanding the problems that we're trying to solve. And we've seen, like in the AI world, major. I mean, look, let's be crystal clear. AI is not new. It's just how we're using it
Is
is
new.
very groundbreaking. So things like protein folding or understanding pharmaceuticals. I mean, these are things that save lives and make huge impacts in certain sectors in very specific applications. Now, when we're talking about AI, most people these days are thinking generative AI, LLMs, that sort of thing. And again, it's a very specific tool. So I say all that just because I think it's the elephant in the room in this conversation that we kind of have to get out of the way really early. That AI is a tool. It will continue to have a place. If there's a bubble that bursts in the next year or so, it will just do what it's always done in tech, where you have a lot of people who are making investments, speculative investments. And if you take a look at, for example, the US stock exchange, a lot of the biggest companies have investments in these areas. So it's a bit scary from a financial standpoint, even from an international standpoint. So I understand the reluctance that people are getting at this point, but I always try to put on that responsible adult hat and say, where does it actually make sense, and are people investing wisely in certain areas? Of course, the answer is yes, in some respects, in some places. And just as much with any new technology, you have tons of people also investing that have no idea what to do. They're just on the train for the next big thing. Like NFTs were obviously, I would argue, probably a big bust in terms of what happened with blockchain. So I think that's a good segue, perhaps to get a little bit deeper into our topic here. But I didn't want to
No, no, no.
ignore
I
that big
think it's,
factor.
that critical point of reminding us that it's not a silver bullet.
No,
It is not manna from heaven. It is essentially a tool.
it's
And
fallible like we are.
yes, exactly. And with that in mind, Chico, when you look at building an AI product, how is it different from building any other software product that doesn't feature AI? Are there functionality differences that require special planning or design? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's very similar in some senses. So, as you know, my background, I was a product manager at Acquia, at New Relic, and other companies. And the fundamentals of product management are the same, right? You really have to deeply understand what problems you're trying to solve and what is the ideal solution. So that hasn't changed when you're developing a product for AI, with AI, et cetera. But what changes is every time new technologies come out, whether it was moving from on-prem to the cloud, or you have cloud going to containerization, or now with machine learning, there's always a learning curve. And the people who adopt it first are the ones who see the battles, right? They're the ones who live in the trenches, and they learn early what the mistakes are. We saw that again, especially with containerization. We're seeing that right now with AI, where folks are taking machine learning best practices and trying to figure out, how do I train a model effectively? How do I do it cost efficiently? How do I reduce the number of tokens? How do I improve accuracy of these models? And things keep changing, right? We're seeing that with the security of AI. People are forgetting how dangerous this technology is in the wrong hands, or in inexperienced hands, right? So we're seeing this now surge of opportunities and new companies coming around AI, basically because AI is being used so extensively. We're seeing these other, and as a product person trying to develop, you have to stay on the cutting edge, right? You have to understand your team may not work as efficiently, and it may take longer to build a product because AI is, in the modern sense with LLMs, generative, right? It is constantly evolving. The models are changing, right? security is just established in this place. MCP is still, gaining maturity. So it's challenging, but it's also, to Chad's point, very exciting. We are seeing, I think, one of the biggest transformational changes in our civilization since the internet became bigger, right? Potentially even bigger one. And there are those of us who are on the front lines and trying to build something that will last through whatever burst there may be. And to do that, we're looking at how can we build something sustainable, something that evolves over time, not something that a bunch of money is thrown at to race to market and hope that it works and hope that it sees adoption, because that's how you end up with the burst, right? So it's just a matter of keeping all of those things in mind as you're trying to go back to, I'm a product person just trying to solve some user's problem.
Yeah, I
And
think
like they have so many times before, I think the stargazing at software sometimes allows us to forget the human element that we're supposed to be building for in the first place.
Yes.
it's that question of what was it? Jurassic Park, right? You were so busy thinking if you could that you forgot to ask if you should, sort of thing. But I think you're highlighting something really important here, Chico, is the idea of ethics, security, privacy. I mean, anytime we're building something, a mature, responsible, let's just say organization or party, really should be taking those things into account, especially if you don't want to, recklessly fall into legal issues. We find ourselves also in quite a unique time where that seems to be a very messy, blurry area, especially in the United States, where that sort of recklessness from an investor standpoint, if I have something that's popular, it's going to gain attention, and I can use that to manipulate large markets and people individually. And I think from a software development perspective, we also see dark patterns. Spam, phishing, all those sort of things are familiar things to us. But how AI can actually be used to not it's not so much doxing somebody, but learning enough about them that you can be very manipulative to them. This could be political. This could be just advertising in general, or it could be even deeply nefarious. Like, how many times do you get a phone call saying, "Hey, I am in the sheriff's office, and this so and so person, they need bail." Like that. Those systems are going to get significantly more intricate, and those dark patterns, I think, we're very sensitive to seeing how they emerge. So back to the whole like ethical, secure, and private side of things. Like for us as software developers and product designers, we want to introduce those things and advocate for them. Um, so reeling it back to OtterMon AI, can you describe what that does and how it compares to other products on the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the dream of OtterMon AI, I think is shared by anyone who has ever been on call at any point in time for support, operations, engineering, right? How many times have we been in a position where, whether we're new or experienced, something goes sideways, something breaks, it's 2 a.m., it's the middle of the afternoon, whenever it is, over the weekend during a family party, and something breaks, and now the pressure is on you to figure out what's wrong. For the past 25 years, we've been watching monitoring evolve and enter a golden age where, I think probably early on in all of our career, we had what, Pingdom, like Google Analytics, like we had barely anything to monitor if our site was up. And, in many cases, if it was down for a little while, it didn't matter back then. But then there was Nagios and CheckMK and then New Relic and Datadog and, Splunk, and all these solutions came out, and they started as point solutions. They evolved into all-in-one platforms, and something happened. There was this thing that I don't think anyone expected, which is that we reached a point where no matter how much money you spend on monitoring, it doesn't ever feel like you're making headway, right? It feels like on the front lines, when you are trying to monitor your site, your infrastructure, I've got this one tool that's really complicated, or heaven forbid, my company has four different tools I have to look at. I have to look
Mm.
at Splunk and Datadog and Prometheus and CloudWatch and Sentry and PagerDuty and what's in Jira. And now you're trying to wrangle all these different tools to figure out what's wrong. And that all assumes that the tool was even set up correctly to help you diagnose the problem, right? So OtterMon was born of a dream from my days way back in Acquia when, we had over 10,000 live sites and using different monitoring tools to try and help ourselves, try and help customers maximize their uptime. And what we essentially realized early on at Acquia was that these monitoring tools in and of themselves, they can be helpful, they can be insightful, but when the data is spread across multiple sources, humans have to be the ones to try and reconcile that. And that lack of insight, that lack of holistic vision into your platform, your site, your security, your costs means everyone in the company is making decisions and taking action based on a partial picture of
Mm.
health and performance and security and cost. So Ottermon takes the world as it is and says most companies do not have one monitoring vendor. And even if you do have one monitoring vendor, you may not be interpreting the data correctly. You may not be visualizing it correctly. You may not be alerting correctly. So, what would happen if we take the data from all these sources, we boil it down to the bare essential signals we know are necessary for diagnostics and determining if my sites and infrastructure are healthy, and we just bubble up? This is what you need to know. We have found your issues. We have found your risks. We have found your optimization opportunities in plain English, right? And then give you the ability to interact with the data on that level. Ask it a question. Say, hey, you detected that this site is having an issue. Here's all the stuff that Ottermon detected on its own, but I still have questions. Let me ask, because now you are working with what is essentially a co-pilot, something that can do what you as a human can't. It understands all the best practices around the technologies you're using, and it can see the holistic picture. It can see the holistic picture of your sites, your infrastructure, your monitoring. So that's what we're developing, something that can bring all that disparate data together, understand it for you, and help you figure out where to focus your attention.
You know, the thing that impresses me so much about where we're evolving to right now and what you're talking about with Otterman is we thought, oh wow, access to all this data is going to be superb, right?
Yes,
And at the end of the day, without the correct taxonomies, without the correct weighting, without the correct knowledge and frameworks behind it, it's just a lot of data,
it
right?
is.
It's not refined, it's not actionable. When you think about and I mean I kind of see you in my mind's eye with this tsunami of data coming crashing towards you. Um, what were the risks and challenges that you grappled with while you were producing Otterman?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. So, I mean, we are at a stage, stepping back, right? We are at a stage where, to your point, the approach to building a cohesive AI is to throw as much data and as much money at it as possible to try and improve the results and improve the knowledge. But what you end up with there is a bias towards the median, I believe
Yep.
it's called, where the more instances you throw at this model where there's commonality, then that becomes what it expects and is normal. But there's a lot of outliers that may be perfectly valid for different use cases, right? And those can get ignored in this methodology. So for us, we're taking an approach that is, one might call it controversial, right? Which is we are coming from the position of saying 99% of observability data either never gets used or it's functionally useless. So we are going to do what a lot of companies fear. We are just going to take the data in and we are going to determine what we think has value. We're going to eliminate the stuff that appears to be low value for the context of diagnostics, optimization, etc. And everything else, as my old friend Amin, also from Acquia, would say, friend of BlueFi, he would say, it goes right in la basura, right? Throw it right in the trash. Um,
Yeah.
so, uh, we have to, I think, as a ecosystem of DevOps professionals, get comfortable with not having 100% fidelity on our data because oftentimes we don't need it. What we need are patterns and we need the signals out of the noise. And as humans, we're going to be inclined to look for very specific signals. We're going to look for very specific patterns. But if someone is able to at least filter out some of the stuff for us and either say, we agree that some of these signals have value, and here's how they should be interpreted, or you're actually missing a few really critical signals, and here's how to get them into your system effectively and the value they'll provide, it allows for so many more insights. So for us, we see that wave of data as one of the biggest problems, and not just in AI, but in observability. It forces people to be overwhelmed. It makes the models less accurate in the grand scheme of things, and it increases costs exponentially as containerization and AI adoption increases. So we have to step forward and say, we're going to tackle this. We're going to look at ways to make the data less alarming, less mountainous, and we're going to pull the stuff out of it, the needles out of the haystack that you need to do your job effectively.
So obviously that involves rules, right? It involves weighting
Yes.
dependent upon a variety of factors, right?
Yeah.
When does that mean you've got to reinvent the wheel every time you go into a new industry with this, or?
Surprisingly, no. That's such a great question. So when I always try to look at things from like how the human brain processes it, right?
Mhm.
When we go into complex systems as human, as flawed individuals who have limitations on what we can learn and what we can do with our capabilities, we are building at any of these companies roughly the same things over and over again, right? If you really boil it down, we're building a system that can respond to action, traffic, right? To perform certain tasks, API calls, e-commerce, specific transactions, right? Email, cron jobs, database queries, queuing. We're using the same building blocks over and over again to different means. So what's missing in observability is that semantic understanding of roles. I like
Yep.
to say it's like understanding the organs in a living, breathing organism, right? The heart plays a function, the stomach plays a function, the brain, the eyes, everything plays a function. So when you step back and say, what is the company trying to do? What is the industry trying to do? What is this site or this infrastructure trying to do? You will find those same roles recurring over and over again. And that allows you to perform these more advanced operations and this more advanced logic that you don't see in any observability solutions today. For example, uh, I might be concerned about high CPU on certain types of services, like a database service. I might be concerned about high CPU there. But if it's a cron job and cron always runs to 100% at the top of the hour, maybe that's not a problem, right? Maybe it's something that I expect. That's seasonal. That's not an anomaly. That's to be expected. Understanding that role means you can understand the ecosystem in a much more holistic way. And that allows us to build out the workflows, the agentic, sequences we need to say, all right, yes, this is high CPU. What type of high CPU? What is the role? What is the function? And then that framework scales to any type of business. As long as you have that underlying logic, customizing it for specific use cases becomes a great deal easier.
So I like what you said so far about the fire hose of information just keeps getting bigger and bigger, especially when it comes to the analytics and the data that we can collect on any system, and the systems themselves are getting that much more complex. But I also like what you're saying in terms of this kind of biological analogy. I've worked in healthcare. I can tell you just the idea of making observations is an important distinction from making recommendations. And I try to do that whenever I'm doing like discovery work or recommending solutions or things like that. I see that a lot also in the medical industry to carry that analogy a little bit further. So if we're checking your vitals, there are certain things that start to tend to stand out. And if you don't know, then you just do additional diagnostics to try to get a bigger, more complete picture. So when we have these fire hoses of information, I think we can all relate to that idea of false positives, false negatives, and there's a degree of responsibility in interpretation. So, yes, you have these common elements in a web or software system that can be observed. Uh, why are we constantly repeating the same thing? Why are we having humans who are also biased and fallible? If I sit two humans side by side with a divider between them, observing the same information, they could come up with very different interpretations of the same information. So a
Yep.
system, just like medical research, a system can really start to utilize the patterns that we establish and understand to at least become the indicators that say, here's what might be happening to nudge an actual human operator in a direction either for more investigation or action of some sort. And it sounds like that's what you're really doing here is taking that possible noise and reducing it down to a more effective signal.
Yep.
So I really like what you're saying here about what it is that OtterMon AI has really focused on and trying to accomplish in our data heavy world. It's not going to get smaller, it's just going to continue to get bigger. So we need useful tools so that way we can minimally do our jobs and preferably not have to waste a bunch of time doing our jobs.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we are looking at this in the perspective of what if observability was like the electricity and the water flowing into your house that you never had to think about it, right? Like that's the point we want to get to, where it is not this cudgel that you have to wield and you resist it because it's heavy and it never works the way you want it to, right? Like observability right now is causing more pain, I think, in many companies than necessarily it may be solving. And
Yeah.
we look at it often as a necessary evil, that if you don't have it, the circumstances will be so much worse. But when teams are dealing with fires nonstop, when teams are dealing with cost overages and now have to stop a sprint to figure out how to reduce the data, what we've essentially allowed ourselves to fall into is the boiled frog problem. So I like to describe it. We forget that observability didn't used to be so noisy, so expensive, so complicated, and we've
Yeah.
just become so acclimated to it that it's just we're numb to it now. And I think we as a community that are building and maintaining these mission critical sites and infrastructure need to stop and say, wait a minute, this is not the way it should be. We have to rethink this together and figure out how to get the balance between value and results and cost back to where they were supposed to be. That is our fight in this generation of the age of AI. And then here's why. To your point earlier in the conversation, we were talking about risks, security, right? Again, humans are fallible. I am old enough to remember when security was one of those things that, you were only really at risk as a business if you either royally messed something up or some black hat hacker with an obscene amount of experience targeted you specifically. What are the odds of that, right? And now we've reached a point now where a bored high school student can sign off of Minecraft and decide, you know what, today I'm going to take some sites down and run some AI prompts and go exploit something. And we are not in a position as a civilization, as an ecosystem, as a market, where we can respond instantly to these instant threats, right? And not in any way, shape, or form. So someone like me, I look at that and say, how can we leverage this technology and start moving the technologies we have forward to the point where we can actually trust them to identify an attack, to diagnose it, to determine remediative steps, and take those remediative steps for us, right? We are probably a decade away from that, but we have to start moving there at some point because the threat actors are already starting to work against us.
Yeah.
I think you make a great point. You're saying we're a decade away from that, right? Because you're saying this thing has to learn all these permutations so that when you put additional contexts on top of it, right? It can go, oh, it's that context. I know the rules for this and blah, 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 right? My sense, though, is, and this is my concern, that we have a great many people who just want to delegate more of their cognitive, effort, or they want to demonstrate an expertise, an unearned expertise that they've never had before, right? So there's this kind of blind allegiance to AI because of how it makes me look.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Rose. The problem with AI at this point, or I mean, there are many, but if we look at that specific example, it's that we cannot trust the models right now. Again, it goes back to what we were saying before. They are biased towards the median, the things they see most often. And if you trust AI to take remediative action for you, it's going to do some really devastating things. We saw that a few months ago where they asked the AI, "Hey, why did you drop my database?" Well, because it seemed like the right thing to do. Did you know it was going to break? Probably. We are not at a point right now where AI can be trusted to automatically detect the source of problems because we don't have the context. We are horrible at documentation, right, in this industry. So without that understanding of why something was built, what it was intended for, the purpose behind it, the AI won't understand properly how to diagnose, how to remediate. And so we always have to have a human in the loop. But so long as the models are limited by those things, that it doesn't have the right data, that it makes mistakes, all these things, we will be at risk of threat actors and issues just biting us left and right and us having to react as quickly as we can. We have to accept some degree of security embarrassment and downtime and higher costs in the interim. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be figuring out what the right methodologies are to mature this technology to the point that it can respond for us.
So I think you're touching on something that keeps ringing in my ear. I mean, being responsible, of course, but I feel like there's this critical question. Um, I actually had a sticker on my laptop for a long time as someone that were led discoveries and workshops with clients that says ask more questions. But this is the question: um, when we're talking about risk, that question really should frame out to what is the consequence of being wrong. And I
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
think that needs to be the thing that we're always look. If the consequence is low, who cares?
Yeah.
But I think when we're basing decisions, investments, etc., on the output, whether it's AI or not, we
Yes.
have to lead with that question: what is the consequence of being wrong? So I think and what you were saying before kind of leads us to one of our next questions. Why are so many startups and AI initiatives floundering?
Oh, that's such a good question. All right. So, I think it comes down to it's frontier technology is one of the first things, right? I mean, again, if you go back to the origin of cloud technologies, a lot of cloud technologies floundered. A lot of .com organizations floundered. When you are adopting a new technology, everyone races to try and build a thing. We're seeing a lot of stuff where people don't realize how hard it is to build a really good, solid product right now. They underestimate the amount of competition in the market. Every what, 3 to 6 months, Anthropic or someone comes out with a new AI model that can do X, and everyone's company just who created a company like that, it just went down the drain. So we're at a stage where the market is evolving so quickly, and these solutions are evolving so quickly that people's ideas, people's vision, and their products are being subsumed very quickly. And then also because the technology is so challenging and so still evolving, people are getting a lot of things wrong and running out of runway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the combination of those two things is really what's driving a lot of the attrition, but that doesn't seem to be stopping the investment or the people saying, I'm going to try this anyways, right?
It's it's interesting because, as an anthropologist, all I do is observational work, right? And when I talk to teams about, what are you bringing to the party? Uh, very often it's perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, I recognize this. I've seen this in the following scenarios, and it, has A, B, or C as the potential outcomes, right? So I'm looking at AI, and as is always the case, it's born of a certain group of people, but then it's very often managed, monitored by a very junior group of people. And it's almost like I keep thinking, Chad, you say this thing in my ear. I Sea monkey. The sea monkey issue with this seems to be people with highly generalized knowledge who don't maybe have depth of knowledge and who are conscious of that, working on this stuff and not working on it in a responsible fashion. Or they don't have the wherewithal to say, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. One of the things that caught me completely by surprise, if we go back to, earlier in the year, is AI adoption, especially vibe coding or AI assisted engineering, depending on which end of the spectrum you're on, right? Uh, as that adoption was increasing, I think there was a lot of panic in the industry. Like, oh goodness, they're going to make all the senior engineer jobs go away, and they'll be able to
Yeah,
replace them with a bunch of juniors. And what we quickly realized is some of what you're talking about, which is that the AI is only as good as the operator, right? If you're not asking the right prompts, you're not going to get the right output. If you don't understand that the output is flawed, you won't be able to either A, get the right results, or B, adjust the prompt to get the right results. And I've been seeing this happen in company after company after company where junior devs, best intentions, best ideas are
absolutely.
going in and trying to do this prompt engineering. And because they lack the context to know what to ask,
Yeah,
and the context and experience they need to know how do I interpret the results and know that it worked effectively, these projects are failing. So what's actually happening, and I fear the continuation of this trend, is the inverse of we can replace all our expensive senior engineers. It's actually why do we need junior engineers when senior engineers are now 2 to 3 times more efficient, right? At
yeah,
OtterMon, one of my co-founders is just using Claude Code to create massive amounts of functionality very, very quickly that would previously take entire teams to do because he knows what to ask, he knows how to interpret the findings, and he can refine both until they get the right results. But in a world where you're now not investing in the junior talent and teaching them the things they need to know to operate at that level, who's going to replace the seniors when they move on to principal or architect or CTO? That that gap is being felt right now. There are kids coming out of college that don't know what to study because they're afraid their industry will be replaced. There are people
correct.
in software and tech who are dealing with the fact that what is it? 500,000 to 1 million people have been laid off in this industry, and
Mhm.
there's not a lot of open roles available at entry level where you can come in green, right? There's an expectation that you come in and you can do fantastical things with the technologies available to you and be super efficient. And in many cases, I don't know that that's realistic.
It's we have taught young people for so long, and we've run businesses like this, that the most powerful people are the people with all the answers.
Yeah,
And AI works the reverse. The most powerful people are the people who can ask the right questions.
that's a brilliant take. Yeah.
And you have a lot of these young people who feel if they have to ask a question, they've somehow undermined themselves. It takes a lot of maturity to ask questions. And
It
so
does. Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, it does, but I think we're seeing in this in this point in history, people asking questions and taking the answers for granted.
Yes.
And if we step back from technology, I fear the implications of people. We are reaching a point as a civilization where people see content and they believe it. They ask questions and they believe the answer the machine gives them. And there is this lack of, I don't want to say maturity, but maybe skepticism that we need to really be teaching our children and each
Or
other, even at our
rigor.
age, a
I think
rigor, right? Like, I mean, how many times have you watched a TikTok video and said, this can't be real? And you see all the comments and people are flying off the handle. And it's like you could have Google searched that this was fake, right? And so I do think it's important that people ask questions, but I think the most critical skill is to then still ask why. Is this answer accurate? Should I believe it? What if this is wrong? And that level of rigor, like you said, is going to be so critical to us not falling down a deep, dark hole as a culture.
So I think you're touching on something that's I don't even think it's necessarily generational because I've seen people of all ages look at a headline, take it whole cloth, watch an AI generated video, or just listen to someone that's knowingly spouting lies. There's
Yeah.
a lack of fact checking. I think that really was precipitated by a change in at least this is a very U.S. centric perspective. A change that happened right around the time of like when Geraldo Rivera was starting to come up in his career. There was some legal changes in the United States where before journalism and news was held legally accountable for the things that it was saying. Then that changed to entertainment news, reality TV, and all of these lies just basically started being spouted out under the guise of, oh, it's just entertainment, and there's no accountability. And it's become so pervasive in, let's just call it information technology, not just even media or news, just everywhere, that there isn't so much this, like you said, scrutiny going into what's coming out, whether that's something from an AI prompt or something that someone's sharing on a social media post or literally anywhere.
So
So yeah,
no, I think you're right. And so the funny thing is my background is actually in TV film production. So what you're referring to is the fairness doctrine,
yeah,
and it was eliminated because I think I like to hope it was well-intentioned people, but people were saying that how can you say that this is unbiased and neutral, right? You are putting a skew on the information you report by selectively excluding certain perspectives of the news,
yeah,
right? And so, to your point, the elimination of the fairness doctrine led to the proliferation of biased content in the media, and we
Mhm.
see that continue in social media, right? And we've reached a point. I think that may be one of the biggest precipitating incidents of the polarization of our culture, right? Where it has led to going back to Rose's original point. It has led to this phenomena in psychology where anything the other side says, we do not believe and we do not see value in. But if it adheres to our own perspectives, we're going to believe it, right? So there's this confirmation bias of sorts
yeah.
between on whatever side of anything you're on. And I fear that we're seeing a little bit of that, depending on how you train these AI models, bringing it back to the original subject. If you get an answer from the AI, if you get a video from TikTok, whatever, that confirms your belief or what you want to be the reality, you will do that. And
Yeah.
in any of those contexts, there's a lack of critical thinking and skepticism and rigor to go back and say, let me at least Google search this. Let me do my own research to see whether or not this is true. It applies at all aspects of our life at this point.
Yeah. And it's just basic understanding of the rules of specific things, right?
Yeah.
So, I give the example of one of my the two chief concerns I have about AI. And these are illustrations of it. One was that I asked AI to define for me the key areas where international tourists were concerned about traveling to the United States. And I said, I need you to source that for me. I would like some hard numbers behind it, etc. So it comes back to me with a list, right? And numbers. And the numbers looked wrong, right? It was like 45, 30, and then everything else was 12. And I was like, that, and some of the elements there were, I just know from other research that it was incorrect. And I said, and it didn't source it. And I went back to the AI bot and I said, where was this sourced from? What's the source on this? There was no source.
And I think that degree of accountability is what we expect of it, and a lot of times we don't get it. I think, Chica, you may have even touched on this a little bit, but I heard somebody describe these very specific, prompt-related responses, where these LLMs are really just focused on filling in the blank and what feels like the most appropriate response for filling in this blank. And I think you referred to this as the
Yeah.
median sort of issue. And if we're not holding it accountable for sources related to those responses, then it's just the LLM's feeling of being right. And that's why we get revised models, is because we're continuing to train and train and train and try to refine these things. And I always tell people it's easier to train something for something that's the correct response or the expected response than it is to retrain it or untrain it to really dial it in. And then sometimes those little fouls pop up later on. So I guess to try to bring it back, because I do want to be mindful of our time here. Um, I think all of this really culminates into a really good segue into this question. What opportunities are there for AI products right now? Such a broad stroke question, but I'm curious what your opinion is.
I think the best way to answer that question is to say that it has never been easier, faster, or less expensive to build a new product than it is right now. It'll keep getting easier, faster, and less expensive. So, if someone can identify what is my unique advantage, my unique perspective on solving a specific problem, now's the time to figure out how do I leverage AI to build this product and solution faster, right? There are people out there who have been dealing with medical issues, personal issues, family issues, right? And they are creating the product they wish they had for taking care of senior relatives, for tracking ovulation, for looking at all these different scenarios that are deeply personal to us or our careers and saying, you know what? Now is my time to solve this problem so that somebody else doesn't have to go through what I did. So I think we are at a kind of a great equalizer moment where anyone with the right intentions can go out, learn, watch some videos, and just start testing a solution, get some validation, find some initial customers, and use that leverage to go out and maybe make their dream come true.
Chad.
Right on. No, that's well said. I think
It was beautifully said.
yeah. I mean, I think everybody still has various responses, and I think your response is really it kept to that like broad stroke question very well. Um, but I think a lot of people might be in different industries and bring a different perspective to say, hey, AI can do this, and to your point, it's never been easier.
I think, one of the interesting things, Chico, is what do you have with regards advice for the listeners? I mean, I know that at Blue Fly every Sunday at 6 p.m. we all get online with each other and we do AI learning every Sunday. Um, and what is your advice for people who are going to be working with AI or thinking about potentially starting their own company and working with AI? What should they do? What are rituals that they should do? What are things that they should read, etc.?
I think that we are at a point right now where learning has never ever been more critical, right? And so this means that people who want to do something different, make a difference, make a change in their lives, they need to find ways to learn and to network to the greatest extent possible, right? So for me, coming in, starting an AI company, I was terrified because it's this emerging technology and I knew almost nothing about it. And how was I ever going to run an AI company if I've never, done much with it myself? The thing is now 9 months later, I know way more than I ever did before. And every day I'm still learning. So the things that I would recommend, go on LinkedIn and follow influencers, follow organizations that are routinely posting news and content. Find mailing lists. I get updates every single day from 3 to 5 different newsletters. Here's changes in the news. Here's what Google just released. Here's what's going on with OpenAI. How the technology is evolving, how people are using it is changing. And then there are events. I mean, I'm in Massachusetts with MIT, and there are recurring networking events where you can go and listen to lectures or guest speakers or just meet other people working with AI. So the combination of those things exposes you to these ideas and people who are new and living and breathing this problem and discovering the edges of this technology for good or bad and different, right? And the every single day that you commit yourself to um, exposing yourself to that type of learning, you are better than the day before, and you are
Yeah.
quickly becoming more of an expert than 99% of the population.
Well said. Well said.
A lot of times I try to find how it is that I or other people can be participants in something by thinking of the future. And I know there are people like futurists who are really experienced in understanding how to predict things deep into the future, whether it's for wise investments or just trying to prioritize research projects or things like that. But just from a general perspective of the thought experiment, if you will, if we fast forward just 5 years, which is a lifetime in technology, what role do you think AI plays in software development? How has it matured? What lessons have we learned in the industry?
I think 5 years from now, the trends I'm seeing boil down to a few things. One, I think you will see a lot of AI assisted coding with the subject matter experts coming in to refine the rough edges, right, and deal with edge cases that the system was never trained for. I think we'll see a lot more stability there. I don't think people will be releasing, as a general rule, lines of code that haven't been automatically tested, documented, analyzed for security vulnerabilities and performance issues, right, against their best practices and monitoring data. One of the changes we're seeing in security right now that will probably bleed over into observability at some point is the notion of, if I see an issue, I'm going to propose the code to fix the issue. And then which is in and of itself great, but then also I'm also going to deploy it and test it and maybe try a few different versions of it to see which one has the best result.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to get into a feedback cycle where you kind of document and indicate what you want the system to build, and the system runs through its own rigor to make sure that it is performant and scalable and functional and secure. Uh, and I think we're going to see a lot of that cycle with humans using AI to make sure that the requirements being fed in are good. Um, so those are the main areas where I think we're going to see a lot of advancement. Uh, I again, I fear what's going to happen with the security implications, right? Humans are not great at updating their code when there are security vulnerabilities, and we're not great at building the most secure and performance stuff. So I think you have to see that level of 5 year maturity in the coding practices, the testing practices, the monitoring, and the analytics to get to the point where the human is not the reason for the flaw, right? So that's where I think we'll probably be in 5 years from now, hopefully sooner. But
Cool. So, Chad, you want to let people know where they can find Aaron and Otterman?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, first off, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you very
Yeah,
much for
thank
for
you.
joining us today. I think this has been insightful for myself, and it's really impressive what it is that you've done so far. So, I guess I'll throw that question to you, Chico. What is the best way for people to contact you?
I love chatting with anyone who's in the DevOps and SRE space. So if you are spending any time whatsoever working with Prometheus, Grafana, Datadog, New Relic, any monitoring solution, just reach out on LinkedIn, Aaron Chico Pacheco, or go to www.ottermon.ai and just send us a message. We love having conversations and just hearing what do you like about monitoring? What do you not like? What are you dealing with day to day? And what are your dreams for how this functionality would work to make your life better?
Mm. And I
Right on.
just want to clarify with people that Otterman is spelt OtterMon Okay.
Ottermon. Yeah.
OtterMon.ai.
Like monitor.
Yeah, exactly.
And are there any like upcoming activities or accomplishments that you want to point out? That's for you, Chico.
So we're getting to the point now. We've been building towards an MVP all year, and we'll be testing a beta version this spring with as many customers as want to try it out with their monitoring, specifically Prometheus and self-hosted Grafana stacks. So again, people should reach out, and we'd love to have them try it and see if it's finding all the things that they couldn't find themselves.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for joining us and very insightful takes not only on AI in general, but it's very interesting to see what OtterMon AI is doing. And
And
for
if,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
And for everybody listening, thank you for listening to the Blue Drop podcast. We've enjoyed having you with us today.
Thanks,
Absolutely. And if
everyone.
you'd like to learn more about Bluefly and our team, please visit our website at bluefly.io. And one more time, Chico, thank you so much. You've just been brilliant. Really appreciate your time today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you both so much for having me.
Yep. Thanks.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.